Welcome to First. I'm Mark Eichmann along with Nichelle Polston and Shirley Min. Bees are an important part of our ecosystem. We'll report on how Delaware state apiarist or beekeeper monitors life inside the hives.
Monitoring the lives of veterans from Delaware who served in Vietnam is part of a larger project aimed at preserving an oral history of that war.
And a Georgetown man has a unique way of preserving interesting sounds. Come listen to the cigar box guitar. First, your public media news magazine starts now.
We don't mean to depress you, but as we roll into September, that means we are one step closer to fall. It also means summer harvests are coming in, and the work of honeybees has made for another successful summer. Our first look visits some hives to see what it takes to keep Delaware's bees in good shape. In a quiet corner of Newark, Ray Walker tends to his bees. He monitors the bees, checking the temperature in their hive, watching for queen bees to produce more bees, and keeping an eye out for disease or parasites. Walker uses natural, traditional beekeeping methods to manage his collection of hives called an apiary. He even uses native Delaware plants, including dried hop cones, to produce smoke to calm the bees down.
And I also use staghorn and sumac blooms. These are old-timey beekeeping practices that have kind of been lost over time.
The bees use chemical signals to communicate, and the smoke interrupts those signals. It's a process that Walker, a former chemical engineer at DuPont, can relate to.
That's one of the things that fascinates me, is these naturally occurring compounds that biologically signal different messages to the bee colony. We need more pollen. We need more nectar. I think there's roughly 30 different messages that they use, so they have a very social structure.
Walker is one of more than 200 registered beekeepers in Delaware, and making sure all those hives are registered is part of Megan McConnell's job. She recently took on the role of state apiarist.
The main goal of the state apiarist is kind of to work with the beekeepers throughout the state and make sure that we aren't getting any kind of new diseases that could come into our state.
She gave us a look inside a pair of beehives recently set up at the Department of Agriculture headquarters in Dover.
So the colony on the left is a nucleus colony that we bought about a month ago. And then the colony on the right is a swarm that we caught on the Delaware Memorial Bridge.
In addition to educating beekeepers and the public, McConnell also monitors bees being brought into Delaware to help farmers with pollinating their plants.
We get a lot of bees that come from out of state, from Florida, Maryland, New Jersey, and West Virginia to pollinate our watermelons and cucurbids, pumpkins, pickles, things like that. We probably have about 3,000 colonies that come in or out of our state or that permanently stay in the state of Delaware.
She's on the lookout for threats to the bee population, and there's no shortage of hazards, especially because so much bee habitat in Delaware has been paved over and urbanized.
We have a lot of things we have to worry about. We have pesticides, applying too much pesticides. We also have to worry about a lot of different diseases and parasites that are in the honeybee colonies. So we have a varroa mite. It's kind of like a little tick. It's the same size on a bee as it would be for a dinner plate on us, and it's sucking its blood and transferring different types of viruses.
Last winter, about 43% of Delaware's bee colonies died, a higher than normal total according to the National Bee Informed Partnership.
Yeah, we lose a lot of colonies in the winter from viruses and infections, bacteria and fungal infections. And that's part of beekeeping, is recognizing diseases, and that's where the state apiarist, Megan, helps beekeepers identify different kinds of infections.
To help improve the chances of survival for Delaware bees, McConnell suggests planting bee-friendly plants or vegetables around your home.
Any vegetables, squash, cucumbers, pumpkins, they're going to come visit, watermelons. So if you wanted to benefit also from those plants, that would be one way of doing it.
Some Delaware chicken farmers are taking steps to help out too.
That is a goal with Delaware, that we are trying to get them to plant more pollinator-friendly buffers throughout their chicken areas.
With the help of the Delmarva Poultry Industry Group, chicken farmers are planting these buffers, which attract bees, but the plant roots also trap nutrients, which in turn helps improve water quality. Every little step helps, and for keepers like Ray Walker, it's a fulfilling hobby.
You have to be dedicated to keeping your bees healthy and providing them the nutrition and monitoring diseases and mites, and it's a lot of physical work, so that discourages a lot of people that work full-time. There aren't that many hours in the day, but fortunately for us retired guys, it's a perfect fit.
Megan McConnell said Delaware has dealt with the loss of bee habitats just like many places around the country. Some of that has to do with development. And even in southern Delaware, where farming is much more prevalent, the bees suffer because of monoculture, or just one type of crop as a food source. The best thing for bees is a diverse source of plants for their needs. The honeybees we saw in the Dover hives are European honeybees, which are traditionally used to pollinate crops here in Delaware. It is big business for beekeepers to supply bees to help pollinate those crops here in the First State.
Coming up on First, Delaware has its own collector of oral histories of Vietnam veterans. A report on the documentary, They Answered the Call. And proving you can make music out of the strangest things, First experiences in Georgetown with the Cigar Box Guitar Man.
The start of the school year brings renewed dreams for students and a host of challenges for educators. Our first person today is Merv Doherty, Superintendent of the Red Clay Consolidated School District. Thanks for joining us today.
Welcome to be here, Chris. Thank you.
Okay, as school ended last year, one of the biggest issues was Governor Carney's proposed $37 million in budget cuts to education. Lawmakers reduced it to $26 million, but it's still $26 million. Now, what's the effect on Red Clay, which is the biggest district in the state with 16,000 students? Have you had to cut teachers? How are you dealing with it?
Well, our reduction was $3.1 million. And so we try to take an approach, look at our total budget. We reduced all adult travel for this year, not student travel with field trips, but adult travel. We reduced our budgets through our district's office staff by 20%, and we did reduce staff members at the district level. We wanted to make sure that our schools were not affected by the cuts. We did a good job of preparing for this. We thought about this about 2 years ago, that things were going to come and how we look at this. It's not like we had a lot of money left over because of requirements of budgets, but we felt that for this year, our schools still benefited from the staffing needs and support needs that they had to have.
And no teacher layoffs?
There were no teacher layoffs, no.
Now, one worry with the budget cuts was that they'll exacerbate the achievement gap between low-income students and those of means. Now, in Red Clay, for example, I believe 26% of low-income students in English are proficient, compared with 63% of those who are not low-income.
Right.
What are you doing to address these issues, and what more can be done? And how do you cut that gap, especially with money lower?
I don't think money is always the issue. We've spoken to the Department of Education, the governor's office, about getting rid of all the silos and getting all the state departments to work together, such as getting the health agencies and children's agencies to work together with education. I used to tell them, all of your clients are in our schools, so why don't you come visit us at our schools? But we've done a lot. Like, example, we've added full-time psychologists this year in all of our schools and full-time educational diagnosticians in our schools to help our students with needs. But also, around the country, this is a big issue and topic. And let's remember this. It's just not the educational piece that we have to worry about. We're dealing with the societal issues and poverty greatly. So we really work hard with making sure our kids have glasses, hearing aids, they have their clothes, they have food, they have the basic needs, because a lot of times our students are coming in without the basic needs even before they walk into school.
Now, in August, the board created a committee to address practices related to racial equity. Now, they're not only going to look at performance, but they're going to look at discipline, they're going to look at hiring practices and more. I understand you embrace this concept. How do you see this working in the district, and what kind of changes do you foresee occurring?
Well, I think the only way you ever get better, either as a business, school district, whatever, you have to continue to look inside yourself, tear apart issues, and rebuild them. We've done it with ELL, English language learners. We've done it with our special ed population with full inclusion. And we wanted to have an opportunity to say, okay, where can we get better at an equity piece? We have a policy of non-discrimination. Are we doing a good job in our hiring practice? Are we doing a good job with our curriculum and our research? Are we doing a good job with our discipline? Our discipline has dropped 37% in the last couple of years. But you know, I can look at it and say, hey, here are the numbers, but are we really doing a good job? I'm excited about the committee. I think the policy is needed. I've spoken to colleagues around the country. We're considered a large district by United States standards, and we need this opportunity to make sure we get better. And I think it's not what you didn't do; it's what do we do? What can we do to get better to serve our students and our residents of Red Clay?
Now, do you believe there's any institutional racism within the district, or that, as Board Member Adriana Bohm says, it's time to enact racial justice through equity?
Yeah, I think no matter how much you say it doesn't happen, I think people are people. And so how do we just address this issue? We've done a lot with cultural awareness with our staffs this year. We're doing it for the last 3 years. We actually had 4 or 5 workshops for our administrators this year to understand different cultures and races. I think that's extremely important.
Okay, now, in this era of charter schools in Delaware, you know, a lot of students are migrating from other districts to the charter schools. How has Red Clay managed to maintain most of its schools, or most of its students in its schools?
I think we have a unique opportunity for our schools. We have 7 different schools that all have a theme to them in high school. We have 8 middle schools. We have 16 elementary. I think we offer a variety of opportunities for our parents and residents of Red Clay to look at the needs of their child, how to help their children. And I think we have developed more of a family atmosphere that we really care about your students. I'm not saying other school districts don't, but I think we have developed to embrace our parents and our students that we really will go the extra mile to help your child be successful. And I think you see that with our 0.9% dropout rate, graduation rates are up, and our retention levels are down, that we're moving students from one grade level who are ready to move forward.
Well, I wish I had more time, but thanks for joining us on First. Merv Doherty is superintendent of the Red Clay Consolidated School District. Check out this interview in its entirety at newsworks.org/Delaware.
As many as 230,000 teenagers, many of them volunteers, worked to keep the roads open and the traffic moving. More than half of them were women. Lei Ming Kuei, who had left her home in the north with a novel by Ernest Hemingway in her backpack, observed her 17th birthday on the trail.
Tất cả mọi người phải chịu đựng như thế. Rừng thì ẩm ướt, bom đạn ngày đêm như thế. Phụ nữ chúng ta thì phải như thế nào mới có thể sống được.
That's another peek at the PBS documentary from Ken Burns on the Vietnam War. The program begins September 17th on WHYY-TV. Now, the story of veterans who were in Vietnam is an important part of history. Preserving those voices in Delaware has become an important mission for T.J. Healy. One look at this map and you'll see an overwhelming number of people who served in the Vietnam War. That number, 8,180,445 vets served across the country. In Delaware, the number reached 26,000. And T.J. Healy, along with a team, is working to preserve history by interviewing those surviving soldiers.
One of the reasons we got this project going is because of the stories these guys. People need to hear their stories.
To date, Healy has recorded the personal accounts of 20 veterans. The goal is to record 450 Vietnam vets.
The biggest problem over there was the Agent Orange. I remember standing in the middle of a field where they just sprayed Agent Orange, and we would buy produce from the Vietnamese. And that meant you were eating the Agent Orange by the time you got it on your table. You didn't know what it was. You just ate it in food, but it would spread.
In 2015, Healy came up with the idea to create an oral history archive called the Veteran Story Project. He later decided to produce a series dedicated to Vietnam.
For Vietnam, we're going to have an hour-and-a-half documentary. This is just for the state. We're going to have an hour-and-a-half documentary and also lesson plans by Wilmington University that will go again back into the public schools and the private schools.
The project will eventually develop into a bigger outreach, capturing the stories of men and women across the country as well.
I had friends who went to Vietnam, not all came back. TJ had friends who went to Vietnam, and we started talking about we ought to do something that really inspires people to find out more about war, about peace, about military, about commitment, about service.
To see things come full circle, these two have developed relationships with the Library of Congress Veterans History Project, U.S. Department of Defense, and the United States of America Vietnam Commemoration 50th Anniversary. And one theme is in mind.
Self-sacrifice. I think that's something that maybe everyone could learn from civilians. I mean, you don't have to be in the military to be a person who thinks of others, but their depth of putting others first when they're in a combat or even if they're not in combat.
The message will extend far beyond video and be included on a campaign bus designed to serve as a mobile studio. The moving billboard will also be used as a Veterans Outreach Resource Center to promote employment, job training, counseling, even educational opportunities, and veterans benefits information.
It's not always centered around death, because some people think, oh my gosh, I don't want to hear about Vietnam because so many people died. They did. But there's so many people who are alive to tell their stories, the stories of the people on the wall and their own.
According to project leaders, although majority of this particular series will include Vietnam veterans, those who fought in Korea will be honored too, and here's why.
Because they answered the call, we can only say thank you. Thank you.
DART donated the bus to Healy to take on tour. The tour will start in Delaware, then officials will take it on the road to states across the country. The tour bus aimed to attract and help veterans is expected to be on the road for the next 5 to 6 years.
Delaware's budget revenues have relied on the process known as escheat. That's when the state takes over abandoned property. A lawsuit has been filed over that practice, and it's the first topic in our Dace on Biz segment. Here's Dace Blaskovitz with Charles Elson. He's the chair of corporate governance at the University of Delaware's Lerner School of Business.
Welcome back to the segment. Charles Elson.
Great to be back, Dace.
We got 3 hot buttons. You ready to go?
Ready.
Very good. Wall Street Journal, late August, featured article talked about Delaware's aggressive collection of, I believe it was escheat. The article says national implications, another black eye for Delaware. What's going on?
Well, apparently 2 people who had their stock taken from them and sold sued in Chancery, and it's got national exposure. They suggest that we were much too aggressive in taking their stock, and that it was not just they, but others as well. And that's a real problem for us. The more aggressive we get, the worse we look around the country. You can't use that to fund your current liabilities. I mean, that's the real problem. That's something that's interesting for us, but when it becomes a significant revenue source, you get too aggressive, and this is what results. And you upset the people who basically are your customers. And I think it's a mistake. And I hope that we become less aggressive on it than before and figure out better ways to meet our budget.
Dual class stock. I'll have a follow-up question, but let's start there. Give us a primer on dual class stock.
Well, basically what it says is that usually when you buy a share of stock, you get a vote in a company. What dual class says is you buy a share of stock and you get less than a vote because someone else, usually the management or the founder of the company, has greater voting than you, even though their economic interests may be the same or less. That's what it's about.
And it's a red-hot issue in your space. Why?
Well, there are a couple of companies that just came out with basically no voting stock. It's you pay money, buy a share of stock, and you get no vote at all. You let the person who sold you the stock vote for you, basically. And it's very controversial because those large investors who invest in these things, who usually understand companies and who use the vote as an accountability mechanism, suddenly no longer have it. And there's some real concern about stock that has no vote, because it means the investor has no say and there's no accountability to the investor.
And then the index funds stepped in, or the indexes, and they are going to exclude these new companies. What's the story?
Yeah, what happened was the large investment funds, who are indexed, which means they buy and sell stock based on whether it appears in an index or not, went to the indexes and said, if you include this stuff for which we have no vote, this is going to basically run counter to our investment philosophy. We want the vote. We don't think we should have to own them. So the indexes responded and basically are keeping these, trading in this stock out of their indexes. In other words, if you don't have a vote, you can't be in a major index.
Tell us what shareholder primacy is.
That means that the only obligation, primary obligation of the directors and the management of your company is to you, the shareholder. It means you come first in the analysis, and that's been the law in Delaware and in most places for a long, long time, because if you didn't have it, who would invest?
All right. Target, roughly a year ago, steps into the North Carolina controversy, bathroom controversy, and in turn, some argue the stock went down 40% while the stock market went up 15%. More recently, Trump and the CEO of Merck steps down because of arguably controversy. Can those CEOs, because of shareholder primacy, be sued?
You know, there's an argument that in doing so, when you mix politics and your day job, if you will, running a company, that it works to the disinterest of the company and its shareholders. Or you take a political position that, you know, may be good for you, but may be offensive to some of your others who work with the company, that's stepping out of the bounds of a CEO. And there was an article in the Wall Street Journal that argued that shareholders could potentially sue someone on that. I think the chance of a successful suit on that are pretty remote, but I think the point is an important one. CEOs traditionally have stayed out of politics for very good reason, because not everyone agrees with your politics, and frankly, the company isn't political. It's to sell a good and service at a fair price.
You're here in part to promote something. September 26th and 27th, what's happening in Delaware?
Delaware's Court Chancery has a big 200th anniversary, and there's going to be a big program to celebrate that, put on by the Delaware Bar, the Widener Law School, the John L. Weinberg Center for Corporate Governance, and some other groups. And we're very excited about it. It's going to be a legal program, but even for non-lawyers, I think it's going to have some interest. And this is the court that really fuels the revenue that really supports this state. And frankly, it protects investors all over the world. So I think it's a great celebration, going to be a great program. It costs a little bit, but I think it's worth going to. I'm certainly going to be there.
As always, fascinating guy. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dave.
That event takes place Tuesday and Wednesday, September 26th and 27th at the Hotel DuPont in Wilmington.
After retiring from a stress-filled job, Tom Allen needed something to do. He discovered how to make cigar box guitars. Now, Tom spends his retirement years making and selling his homemade creations. First Experience visits his Georgetown home to see and hear.
I'm Tom Allen. When I had to retire, I had an extremely stressful job. Suffered 4 heart attacks, and the doctor said, you need to quit, or you're not going to be here. I really needed something to do. So because I have a love for blues music, and I've played guitar since I was 12 years old, I really got into that history of guitar making and came across cigar box guitars. First one was absolute junk, although I still have it. From there, I guess you call it, honed my craft, and a friend came over one day and saw it and said, you ought to come to this blues festival I do every year, and went out, sold a bunch of guitars, and I kept going from there. I say you can make music out of anything. Metal lunch boxes. I've used an Altoids tin. I've used VW Beetle hubcaps. Anything that I can get a pickup in to electrify it, because everything I do is pretty much all electric. If I can get a pickup in that little box some way, I'm gonna make some guitars out of it. I find boxes in a lot of places. Cigar boxes have become harder and harder to come by. My wife and I do a lot of like thrift store shopping to look for what I call onboard guitars. If it's a box of some nature, I'll try to make it work. I think my favorite part is really playing the finished product. It's a level of satisfaction. There can be a huge level of frustration if it's not working right and you have to rebuild. You know, in the beginning, I think I probably smashed a few. So I do it when I feel like it. I do it for fun, and I made a determination a few years ago that what I do, I'm gonna have fun with it, and if not, I'm going to stop. And I tell everybody, if this ever becomes a job, I quit. When somebody buys one, you know, first of all, I want them to enjoy it. Second of all, I want them to be happy. And I am proud to say in the 6 or 7 years that I've made guitars, I've never had an unhappy customer. And you know, I'll fix it. If it's wrong, I'll fix it. I don't want somebody out there saying I bought this guitar from Tom Allen and it's a piece of junk. I want them to say I bought it from Tom Allen, I love it, and I'm going to play it. You know, so really the end result is I just really want somebody to be happy with it. You pick one up and play it, and if you like the sound, then that's the one for you.
Tom says he can make music out of almost anything, including a soup can. He takes this soup can guitar into schools to talk about music. You can find Tom and his guitars at music and craft fairs around the region. Visit him on the web at outoftheboxguitars.com for more information.
And next week on First, Muslim Americans in Delaware are finding their voice to speak up on issues. We'll explain. And the inaugural summer of the new and improved Longwood Gardens fountain shows comes to an end in a couple of weeks. See what you're missing.
We will also look in on some of the Violent Summit taking place September 9th. That is first for this week. We thank you so much for watching. For Shirley Min and Mark Eichman and Chris Barish, I'm Nichelle Poston. Have a great week.